Hello, Nicole and Veritza. It's so nice to see you and finally see this project coming to its conclusion. And it's a great chance to talk about the work that we did and talk about the poem and the wonderful song. The song, which was written in 1826 and has never been published, and to my knowledge has, well, it's not been recorded, and it's possible it's not been performed in almost 200 years. So this is really unearthing a wonderful treasure. I want to start by talking about the poem. The poem is called Geheimnis, or Secret, and it's written by a poet that I think most people wouldn't know, who happened to be friends of the Mendelssohns. His name is Friedrich Voigts, Voigts. He was a tax collector and a poet who knew the family, but wasn't known much, I think, outside the family. I want to ask you both first, when you first encountered the poem, and I get the sense that for both of you, you perhaps looked at the poem first before diving too much into the music. What did you make of it? What puzzled you? What intrigued you? What were your first impressions of the poem itself?
Veritza, would you like to? Well, I found the poem concise, descriptive, full of color and nuance, but I guess misleading in the sense that I was brought into a particular sort of, I don't know, story, a particular sort of world at the beginning, and I didn't end up in the same place at the end. So the first time that I read the poem, it was difficult for me because it was quite short to actually feel the transition keenly. It was only after reading the poem a few times that I understood that it was more sort of paced and nuanced than what I thought, because it felt like an adjunct change at the end.
So you mean the transition from, so first stanza is about the rose that dies, and then the second stanza is about the nightingale that dies, and then the third stanza is about the spring that murmurs, and of course doesn't die because it's water, and continues to kind of whisper the secrets of these creatures that have passed on. So it was that turn in the last stanza that...
Turn in the last stanza, and I think that you've explained it eloquently in the way that you've just outlined it. It makes sense, of course, you know, because you have these two sort of, I don't know, romantic symbols of, you know, sort of death and longing and yearning and love, and you know, but and so there's the expiration of a certain sort of feeling or emotion, and then there's this sense of something that's sort of perennial and evergreen and effervescent. So to me, that stark contrast on the first reading, it sort of made me feel a bit, I don't know, discombobulated. I didn't know that it just felt not a mistake, of course, but something that I didn't really know how that was going to manifest in performance.
Especially, as you said, because the poem is so short, it's just 3 stanzas. So you don't have much time to prepare for the shift that happens in the last stanza.
Perhaps that was deliberate, I'm not sure.
Yes, I think I will echo what Nicole said. When I first read the song, you know, being short and having 3 very quick changes, or three pictures, 3 scenes that were following, and I think I was a little bit misled with the image that it created for me. For me, it seemed, I felt it was a bit darker than in the end it turned out to be, and particularly the beginning in deep dark green, in dark green forest, and the death of the rose and the death of the nightingale. It kind of painted a darker forest and a darker story than I felt it to be in the end. And then I think that Nicole and I eventually performed it.
Yeah.
In the end. So that
brings,
was the main surprise for me.
Interesting that both of you used the term misled. And this brings another question to mind, which can allow us to transition a bit toward the song. I agree with you, Veritza, that the poem has all this dark imagery, deep green, languishing, death, even dreams. It seems very, very shrouded, very, very dark and mysterious. When you first looked at the song, so having looked at the poem for a while, and then you turned to the song, so you put it on your piano and started to make sense of it, even just by looking at it, were you surprised by anything you saw in the song? And I bring this up because I'll just say that I was a little surprised when I first encountered this piece a long time ago, that it wasn't, at first it didn't seem as dark as I thought it was going to be, because it's in a major key. For various other reasons, it didn't have the kind of super solemn, very dark, almost kind of shrouded quality that I expected. Did you have a similar experience when you first looked at the music?
Definitely.
You're both nodding. Nicole,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me, the paradox, when I first, sort of engaged with the musical score in conjunction with the text, was how busy it was. Whereas for me, just reading the text by itself at the very beginning, it required something that was a little bit more, I don't know, von Ewige Liebe, or, something that was a little bit more stately, a little bit more sort of, as you say, solemn in terms of setting the scene, because it's not so much even, the issue of dark, it's the issue of depth. So it's texture, it's color, it's even, that sort of headiness, that sort of weight of darkness, so this sense that underneath, certainly from a pianistic point of view, underneath you've got this sort of motor, which suggests life force, which suggests something that's burgeoning, or that something that's dynamic, So in a way that there was a delicious paradox, because it wasn't something that put me off. It was more like, oh, okay. And then I thought, wow, I have to try and think what I'm going to do with this, because if I don't make sense of it, then it's not going to transmit, in any sort of meaningful way. So it was complex.
Well, what's interesting, and we'll get to this when we talk more about the song, what Fanny Hensel is doing, of course, is putting the murmuring spring right at the left edge and having it murmur throughout. So when you read the poem, the last stanza is a shock. When you listen to the song, it's a shock in that you don't realize that there'll be this ever-going, ever-flowing life force, to use your term, at the end. But when you listen to the song, it's there from the very beginning. So she's kind of cluing us into what's going to happen in the last stanza musically right from the beginning of the song, which is actually really ingenious, I think.
Yeah, it's like a spoiler.
Yeah, exactly.
It's giving us a little preview, a trailer for the last stanza.
Exactly.
Musically, yeah.
Vocally, for me, it was a surprise, because I didn't expect very simple legato melody, very simple legato lines that are rather beautiful, and without that much, without the imagery that I had in my head, without the feeling that I had reading the song. And then I had another surprise when I heard the piano, because what I could do was just play some basic chords when I was learning the song, but not hear the whole of the piano. And then hearing the contrast between the legato, simple vocal line that just flows as if you were walking through the woods, and then to have the piano, the motoric, moving, murmuring force throughout the song was another surprise for me. So it was a double one.
Well, that makes me think, I hadn't really occurred to me. So the person the speaker in the poem is, of course, not an ever-going, ever-flowing, never-ending life force, right? It's a human being. And so, of course, is the person singing, you, Veritza. And it's interesting that the melody does not have that constant fluid motion, and it stops, and then at the end, of course, the piano has to come to a rest also, but the piano murmurs in the final bars, and suggests to me that maybe there's even a deeper meaning here, that not just the rose and not just the nightingale, but also we ourselves will languish unto death, and the stream, which it's really fascinating, is there from the beginning, and there at the end will flow ever onward. It's a beautiful image.
I think that was what both Nicole and I were discussing, and I think that's what eventually led us not to take this song in the original reading sense, but to make it much more philosophical, I think, and rather than gloom and doom of dying birds and flowers, and as initially thought.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on the poem and your beginning thoughts on the music, which we'll discuss more in a moment.